Man, I never thought I would be making a video about a topic like this. Hey everybody, Alex the Critic here, and on July 13th, 2024, Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for the upcoming United States presidential election, was hosting a rally for his supporters in Butler, Pennsylvania, when a gunman armed with an AR-15 perched himself atop a building that was only 100 or so feet away from the stage Trump was speaking from, and fired several shots towards his podium. The gunman injured 4 rally-goers, including the presidential nominee himself, whose left ear was grazed by one of the bullets, and killed another, an engineer and volunteer firefighter with a loving family by the name of Corey Comperatone, before being killed himself by counter-snipers from the Secret Service. Trump was then rushed to a nearby hospital, but not before stopping to make one of the most fierce displays of resilience I've seen in quite some time, raising his fist in the air and urging his supporters to continue their fight. I defy you to show me a more inspiring photo than this. Most of you are probably wondering why I'm covering this, even though I said on Gab that I would be focusing on cartoon-related content while I work on my Nezzy Monster video. Well, with all due respect, I think that a former president and current presidential candidate having an attempt made on his life, something that hasn't happened in 40 years, mind you, is a little more important than bitching about SpongeBob or Nezzy Monster. With that said, those of you who've followed me for a long time can already guess how I feel about what happened. If you can't, then let me be blunt here. I wholeheartedly condemn the violence that occurred on July 13th and would be equally distraught if Joe Biden was the one who was caught in the crosshairs. While I'm not one of the people who believe that political violence is never justified, America was founded by a prolonged act of political violence after all. It was absolutely not justified in this instance, and anybody who argues otherwise is a psychopathic mongoloid. And make no mistake, you guys, a lot of people on the left were not only trying to justify this assassination attempt, but were openly bemoaning the fact that the shooter missed. We're not just talking about random nobodies with half a dozen followers either. Some of the biggest online voices in leftist politics have been cheering on the fact that a presidential candidate almost got murdered. First you had Destiny, who argued both on Twitter and in numerous debates that Trump is a dictator trying to destroy America, and so whatever happens to him and his supporters is justified.
The whole idea that the reason why we're here is because liberals and the left just haven't cucked out enough. The reason why we're here, the reason why we don't have our Supreme Court justice, the reason why Trump has to get criminal immunity to survive his court case is because the left just isn't kind enough. Nah, I'm over it. I'm super over it. My only regret is that the guy didn't spend more time. Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying.
That is not what I'm saying.
Hold on. You're saying we're here right now because the left is turning the attention too much. No, we're here right now because Trump is fucking insane, because he has support from 90% of the conservatives in the Republican Party who are entirely un-American. Fuck them. Whatever happens, happens. I don't give a fuck. At this point, my only regret is that the guy didn't spend enough time practicing first. It is insane how much conservatives get to set the fucking standard on all the conversation in this country. It's absolutely insane. We're supposed to jump up and feel sad that the guy who is one of the most divisive presidents in all of history got shot at? Fucking give me a break. Please give me a fucking break.
Okay, one person is dead who isn't Trump, right, who got shot out. Someone in the crowd that was just going to a rally who got fucking murked by this guy. And 2 others are in critical condition. I think it's okay to show a little empathy, don't you?
You're right. Hold on. I'm sorry. I didn't know somebody else died. What state was this in?
Pennsylvania. My state.
Swing state voter. Fuck you. Sorry, what?
Oh God, where do I even begin? First off, this idea that conservatives shouldn't be outraged over what happened to their presidential candidate because said candidate is a dictator who's used violent means to push his own political agenda is ludicrous. Donald Trump has already been our president for 4 years, during which time the vast majority of political violence was enacted by leftist groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter. The most authoritarian thing Trump ever did was the COVID-19 lockdowns, which, might I remind you, were championed by and defended by leftists, not conservatives. Even then, however, Trump did not issue any laws forcing people to stay at home, as several states chose to stay open or only issue limited restrictions during the pandemic without any legal challenges from the federal government. On top of that, Trump never enacted a lot of the harsh solutions he proposed for issues like immigration and political corruption. That wall he wanted to build on our southern border, he never finished. Those enemies of his that he wanted to lock up, like Hillary Clinton, they're still roaming free. The Muslim ban, that was only in effect for 2 months before being replaced with a much softer ban after facing numerous legal challenges from several states. Last but not least, the Supreme Court judges Donald Trump appointed to office helped overturn Roe v. Wade, a decision that did not federally criminalize abortion, but instead reverted the power to criminalize it back to the states, meaning that if you lived in a state whose citizens want abortion to be legal, then you can pass a state law legalizing abortion without the federal government coming in and stopping you, and vice versa. Yeah, that really strikes me as something an authoritarian fascist would do. As for the idea that conservatives have been allowed to control the political discourse here in America for years, I have 2 words for you: Nick Fuentes. Whether you like Nick and his politics or not, it is undeniable that the man has been removed from every single social media platform for his views. He was even debanked and put on the no-fly list for a time. It wasn't until Elon Musk bought Twitter that Nick was allowed back on it, and even that took a while to happen. And he's not the only far-right activist who's been censored for their politics. Alex Jones, David Duke, Richard Spencer, Jared Taylor, and so many other far-right activists have faced some measure of deplatforming for promoting far-right ideas. Alex Jones in particular was forced to pay $1 billion to the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting for saying it was staged. Hell, I myself have had 2 videos of mine taken down because I dared to question the measures we used to stop COVID-19 from spreading, censorship which, once again, was supported by the left. If that wasn't bad enough, I've lost count of the amount of people who have lost their jobs or have been ostracized from their communities for voicing conservative opinions. Wouldn't the opposite of all of this be true if conservatives were the ones who had a stranglehold on American political discourse destiny? Now, let's address January 6th. Because the way Destiny presents the event is very disingenuous. Destiny paints the riots that took place that day as a murderous insurrection carried out by traitorous fascists. However, there are 3 things that Destiny neglects to mention. First, Donald Trump explicitly urged his supporters to stay peaceful on Twitter. He even told them to support the Capitol Hill police as well as law enforcement in general, stating that they were on, quote, our side. 2. The reason why Trump supporters stormed the Capitol that day is because they thought the 2020 election was compromised by bad actors, and so they were trying to keep Joe Biden from stealing the presidency. Whether you believe that the 2020 election was rigged or not, you cannot condemn the January 6th riot as an insurrection because the aim of the rioters was to preserve their democracy by enforcing what they believed to be the will of the majority of Americans on the government. 3. If Trump was really aiming to topple the American government so he could make himself the supreme ruler of our country, why didn't he assist the rioters by backing them up with the United States Army? He was the commander-in-chief at the time. If he had really wanted to, he could have ordered tanks to roll through Washington, D.C. and blow up his political opponents, but instead, he entrusted the task of overthrowing the federal government to a mob of untrained, unarmed civilians. To pour further salt on the wound, all the rioters ended up accomplishing was smashing some windows, breaking some furniture, and taking pictures of themselves sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk before leaving the Capitol. Vandalism that pales in comparison to the millions of dollars of private property damage that was inflicted by the Black Lives Matter riots. Hell, the only casualty during the rioting itself was of a Trump supporter named Ashley Babbitt, who was shot and killed by Capitol Hill police. Wow, what a great insurrection, you guys. You're totally going to establish Trump as your emperor with this one. With all of these things in mind, it's ridiculous that Destiny points to January 6th as justification for the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, because Trump never called for a violent riot, and even if he had, it would have been for the same reasons that Destiny is defending his attempted assassination: to preserve democracy. He can't even argue that conservatives justified the event because there are plenty that condemned the violence that took place on that day, myself included. Nor can he argue that conservatives are solely responsible for polarizing the country with violent, divisive rhetoric because the left has been just as guilty of doing that for the past decade. Don't believe me? Here's a short montage of both mainstream media talking heads and celebrities practically calling for violence against Trump and his supporters.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't, they're not going to let up, and they should not.
If you think we're rallying now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
I'm sorry, Destiny, but your position is untenable, and I can't even give you credit for being honest and consistent about your view of Trump, because when Chase Geezer challenged you to a duel under Texas's mutual combat law, you responded by blocking him. What kind of a bitch do you have to be to argue for killing your political opponents only to block the first person who attempts to hold you to that same standard? Then again, Destiny allows his wife to get railed by other men, so I shouldn't be surprised that he's such a spineless weasel. There's so much more I could get into with regards to Destiny, such as his utterly unhinged debate with Piers Morgan about this assassination attempt, but frankly, I refuse to waste any more time humoring this moron's arguments, so I'll instead move on to my next target, Hassan Piker. Hassan has said his fair share of unhinged bullshit throughout his career, such as when he said America deserved 9/11.
America deserved 9/11, dude. Fuck it. I'm saying it.
We're there to partner with them. We're not there doing our own thing. We're there partnering and training
in a video
and
game.
Equipping and enhancing their capabilities. So that's part of what we're doing. And the other part is just knowledge. We want to know what's happening.
Like, we fucking totally brought it on ourselves, dude. Holy shit. We did. We fucking did. In a video game.
Unsurprisingly, his commentary on the Trump assassination attempt was not devoid of batshit crazy statements. Firstly, he accused Trump of farming clips from his assassination attempt.
Trying to get as much information as they can right now. Clearly,
he's still throwing up
there are a
fists
lot
while
of
they're
events
putting him
that
in
are
the
moving
fucking
very
car,
quickly
bro.
at this
Stop throwing
time.
up
The
the
president,
fist.
only
Stop
moments
it.
before this took place,
Stop
in
fisting.
church at Rehoboth,
Stop.
and then he exited the
Every
church.
fist is
Reporters
another
asked him if
10,000
he
in a
had-
fucking
if he
red
was aware
state,
that
a
or
key
had been
state turning
informed
into a
about
red
it. At that
state.
time, he had not been. It's clear at this
Every time he throws up his fist, Michigan is more over than it
is
was
clearly
before.
a very dramatic moment for this country.
He's
both
farming it.
President Biden and
New
many
York
members
is now officially a battleground state.
of all kinds. Nobody anticipated anything of this kind to take place. As someone who travels routinely,
He's clip farming harder than the new crop of FaZe talent. He's like FaZe Ronaldo. He's clip farming harder than Jinxie. He keeps throwing up his fucking fist.
Been at many of these Trump rallies, and
It's
here's a new picture from one of our colleagues there on the ground, the photojournalists who are in the front row showing the blood on former presidents. Usually quite wide here, and having traveled with former presidents.
This implies one of two things. Either Trump didn't actually care about the underlying implications of somebody trying to murder him and is instead cynically using this attempt on his life to boost his own ego rather than this being a bold display of resilience in the face of certain death, which Hassan provides no evidence for, or Trump staged the whole thing to cynically use it to boost his own ego, which, again, Hassan provides no evidence for. Look, it's one thing to suggest that this may have been a failed setup by Trump's opponents, as there are definitely a lot of things about the way this attempt took place that raise an eyebrow. Why wasn't the rooftop that the gunman fired at Trump from secured by the Secret Service? Why were the authorities slow to respond to rally-goers reporting the shooter to them as he was climbing onto the building he would shoot at Trump from?
Greg was someone who was here. You weren't inside the event, but you were just outside. Tell us what you saw.
So we had a party here all day. You can see behind us at the Brinkles Farming Greenhouse here. We had a party. And we all decided, hey, you know, when we hear Trump up there, we're going to walk up through the field, stand by the trees up there under the shade, and watch and listen to the rally, right? We couldn't see him, but we could hear him. So we walked up, and probably 5 to 7 minutes of Trump speaking. I'm estimating here. I have no idea, you know. But we noticed the guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, and, you know, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle, absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police were like, huh, what? You know, like they didn't know what was going on. You know, we're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. You know, he's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for, 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
So you're certain that the shots came from that guy on the roof?
100%. 100%.
And he was up there for a couple of minutes.
He was up there.
You saw him up there for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. At least 3 to 4 minutes.
And you were telling the police and the Secret Service.
We were telling the police. We were pointing at them for the Secret Service, who were looking at us from the top of the barn. They were looking at us the whole time when we were standing by that tree.
Why was a woman half Trump's size one of the agents entrusted with using her body to shield Trump from any damage? These are all valid questions that deserve an answer. But the possibility of the whole thing being staged by Trump is not one of them for a multitude of reasons. 1. Why would he have the shooter aim for his head and use real bullets, something that would drastically increase the odds of things going wrong and him winding up dead? If that wasn't the plan and the shooter just made a mistake, why would Trump have hired a shooter who's so incompetent with firearms that it put his life at risk? 2. Why is it that the shooter had no ties to Trump or his campaign, and in fact donated money to a left-leaning political organization? If Trump was going to fake all of this, why wouldn't he hire somebody who at the very least is neutral on him, or who had no ties to politics whatsoever? Wouldn't Trump hiring a never-Trumper or a psychotic leftist to be his assassin just give the gunman more incentive to not go along with the plan and actually try to kill Trump for real? Something that I presume Trump wouldn't want if this was to be staged, since it's kind of hard to be elected president if you're dead. Ah, but Alex, I hear you say, what if the shooter was merely pretending to be anti-Trump? Then I have to give credit to the Trump campaign for putting in the least amount of effort for a cover story in the history of cover-ups. If they were going to stage this and have the shooter come across as an anti-Trumper, you would think they would have him do more than just donate one time to one leftist organization. Have him vote for other candidates other than Trump in the Republican primaries. Or shit, just have him skip over that, register as a Democrat, and vote for Joe Biden in the primaries. Have him attend Joe Biden rallies. Send him to some left-wing counter-protests. I'm sorry, but one donation to Act Blue does not a convincing cover story make. 3. A man died in the attack, and his name was Corey Comperatone. You cannot fake that. Not in the digital age, and not when there were hundreds of eyewitnesses. Putting that aside, do you have any idea what kind of damage would be done to Trump's image if it's found out that this was at all staged? His political career would be done for, and he would be thrown in jail for murdering one of his own supporters. That risk far outweighs the benefit, especially when this event took place 4 months before the actual presidential election, which is more than enough time for both professional and amateur investigators to sniff out any foul play. If Trump was indeed going to stage this, why wouldn't he wait until a week before Election Day when that popularity boost would be most crucial? This was not staged, and anybody who argues otherwise is a lunatic not worth engaging with. I would leave things off here and move on to my next target, but there's one more clip from Hassan that I want to respond to, which concerns his reaction to mainstream media pundits discussing what people close to the shooter had to say about him.
Knew him as a child who was a former member of the varsity rifle team, said, quote, he was a nice kid who never talked poorly of anyone, and I have never thought him capable of anything I've seen him do in the last few days.
Bro, that's how you know this motherfucker was white, by the way. White as hell. This dude shot at the president, the former president. That is how you know he was white. Like, I'm talking not even like a little Italian white. That's how you know. Bro, if this dude was even like a little bit Latino, if he had like one family member from Spain or some shit, they would be like, undocumented migrants, man. You know how they are. He was white, bro. They're calling him a kid. They're saying he was a nice kid. Woo! He was so goddamn white, dude. Holy.
Alright, so let's ignore that this anchor woman was just reading what somebody else had to say about the shooting, and thus wasn't personally treating the shooter more charitably because he's white. Let's also ignore that news outlets like CBS have a left-wing bias and have historically downplayed the violence committed by far-left rioters because of their left-wing bias, meaning that they would be less inclined to defend the honor of a kid who tried to shoot the president just because he's white. Let's even ignore that Hassan is trying to turn an issue that's got nothing to do with race into a racial issue. The biggest problem I have with this clip, and the reason why I believe it disqualifies Hassan from ever being taken seriously about anything, is that he thinks people from Spain count as Hispanic.
Bro, if this dude was even like a little bit Latino, if he had like one family member from Spain or some shit, they would be like, undocumented migrants, man. You know how they are.
Hassan, you are a retard. And the fact that you have as many followers who take you seriously as you do is a damning indictment of just how far gone American leftists are. The last person I'm going to be shitting on today is Short Fat Otaku, aka Dev, a YouTuber I've actually liked for quite some time, who immediately pinned what happened at the Butler rally on Trump and conservatives, despite the fact that the shooter's identity and political leanings had yet to be fully established at the time he posted these tweets.
Oops.
Seriously, how little self-awareness must you possess to chastise so-called partisans for overreacting to political events instead of waiting for the facts to come out so that level-headed solutions to the problems can be implemented, only to jump at the chance to hold conservatives just as responsible for Trump's would-be assassination, despite having no confirmation about who the shooter is, what political beliefs he had, or even what kind of rhetoric influenced his actions. You even admitted in a follow-up tweet that you weren't sure of the shooter's identity or political affiliations, but that people still shouldn't be ready to escalate things. So who here is really doing the reacting here, Dev? On top of that, wouldn't telling Trump supporters that they're equally responsible for their own candidate nearly being killed within hours of the attempt just increase the odds of them escalating the situation by enraging them? Call me crazy, but when emotions are already running high, I would think that a non-partisan such as yourself would want to keep those emotions from spurring on any overreactions by, you know, not making people more emotional. The hypocrisy doesn't stop there, folks. Only a few short days after posting these tweets, Dev would post an 11-second clip of a political VTuber named Kirsch seemingly being hypocritical herself by criticizing Destiny for making fun of Corey Comperatone's death, only to then say that all jokes are acceptable and that the best time to make jokes is immediately after a tragedy has taken place.
He's out here mocking and making fun of people that got shot because they're Trump supporters. All jokes are acceptable, and immediately after a tragedy is typically the best time to make a joke about said tragedy.
The problem with this? These two clips are taken from two different live streams, and in the intervening time between those two live streams, Kirsch has clarified on Twitter that she believes jokes about the victims of a shooting are off limits, but not jokes about the shooters themselves. She reiterated this point in a stream she did covering another VTuber's controversial comments about the Trump assassination attempt.
So this person also goes on to say, she then immediately jokes about a trans person shooting up a church and bringing up how it was the testosterone that made them aggressive. Joking about a shooter perpetuating a crime is always the correct thing to do. Like, why? These are like the people who are just like, you can't joke about Hitler. And it's like, the most anti-Hitler thing to do is joke about Hitler. Why would you take him seriously? Why would I not joke about the fucking trans idiot who shot up a school? Why would I give them legitimacy? Why would I do that? Why ever joke about the victims? Exactly.
Now, whether or not you think Kirsch's clarification is stupid and doesn't make her position any less inconsistent, it's still incredibly dishonest for Dev to ignore all of this context and post these two clips from her live streams in order to make it seem as though she has this glaring double standard that she's never once attempted to reconcile. He can't even argue that Kirsch's clarifications came after he posted his tweet, and so he couldn't possibly have known about them because both the tweet and the video I referenced were posted days before Dev shared those two clips of her. Oh, and by the way, Dev's immediate follow-up to this tweet doesn't address Kirsch's clarifications. It instead contains a snide remark about how he's never not going to laugh at hypocrisy. This means that Dev went digging through Kirsch's streams to find something that made her look like a hypocrite, ignored her clarifications of the position in question, and then presented the clips that he found as evidence that she was a glaring hypocrite. What was that you said about not engaging in confirmation bias, Dev? Also, fuck you for making me defend a VTuber, you fucking asshole. Next, Dev shined a spotlight on opinions Corey Comperatone had previously shared on Twitter that he personally disagreed with in order to counter the joke that fans of another political commentator named Sargon of Akkad had made about how shooting into a leftist protest results in sex offenders and wife beaters being killed, but shooting into a conservative rally results in a beloved family man and upstanding member of his community being killed. This went about as horribly as you can expect. Dev's first example was of Corey saying that he would choose Russian President Vladimir Putin in response to a tweet that asked the reader who to save among the choices presented, which consisted of the aforementioned Russian president, Hillary Clinton, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Joe Biden. According to Dev, this made Corey not just a bad person, since good people generally don't like Putin, but unpatriotic, since somebody who truly puts America first would save an American political figure, not a foreign one. Ergo, the joke that started this whole thread doesn't work. Let's break down why this argument is stupid. Firstly, Corey's tweet by itself is not a stamp of approval of all of Putin's actions. He could very well have found Putin disgusting, but nevertheless the most viable option because the other three are much worse people. Dev wouldn't know that because he's merely assuming that Corey is a Putin puppet over one tweet that contains only 2 words: Putin 100%. In other words, he's looking for evidence that confirms his bias against partisans, no matter how flimsy the evidence itself might be. The very thing he criticized partisans for doing after the assassination attempt on Trump.
Now that is irony!
Secondly, I don't think Dev realizes that he shot his own point in the foot with his shitty wording. Pay attention to what he said in his second tweet. Quote, "But good people generally don't like Putin." The key word there is generally, meaning that there are exceptions to this rule, and Sargon and his fans would argue that Corey counts as one of those exceptions.
Oops.
Lastly, Dev is committing a no true Scotsman fallacy by arbitrarily deciding that true America Firsters wouldn't value the life of a foreign leader over the life of 3 American politicians without providing any reasoning for why that standard should be adhered to. There could very well be reasons why saving Putin's life would be in America's best interest. One could also argue that the American leaders that the original poster referenced in his question are themselves un-American, and thus supporting them would be un-American for similar hypothetical reasons. Dev never considers any of these possibilities, nor does he even lay out what the platform of an America Firster even is, meaning his contention here is completely baseless. The second example, and the last one I'm going to be covering because this video is getting far too long as it is, concerns Corey praising the Jan 6th rioters by saying that they, quote, had enough of Mike Pence. Mike Pence, if you didn't know, was Donald Trump's first vice president, and Trump supporters who believed that the 2020 election was rigged also believed that Pence could overturn the results of the election by bringing in electors that would have voted for Trump, but simply chose not to do it because he's a backstabbing traitor. That left Trump's supporters no choice but to storm the Capitol in order to preserve their democracy themselves. That's the full context behind Corey's tweet, and in response to it, Dev argued that Corey, quote, was against Pence rejecting the false electors. However, this point only works if he can prove that Corey knew that the electors were false and yet still wanted to use them to overturn the results of the 2020 election, which he can't. Otherwise, he would have done it in the fucking tweet instead of just asserting that it was true and hoping that nobody would notice that Corey obviously believes that the integrity of the election was compromised by bad actors and that Trump was trying to restore it. Oh, and considering that the Democratic Party just bullied Joe Biden into dropping out of the race so that the elites of the party could install a new candidate, thereby subverting the will of the people who voted for Joe Biden in the state primaries, people like Dev and Destiny lose all right to complain about the Jan 6th riot. At least those rioters thought the election was rigged. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, thought that the election was doomed, so they rigged it to put forward a better nominee. Dev harping on about Corey's thoughts on Pence's response to Trump's plans to save the 2020 election also rings hollow when he admitted to another political commentator named Ace1918 that the FBI did try to meddle in the election by forcing social media websites to censor discourse around Hunter Biden's laptop, something that would have definitely hurt Biden's chances of being elected president, but that it was okay because the attempt failed and Biden did more good things than Trump anyways. Yep, there's definitely nothing partisan about that point of view, no siree.
Come on. Come on, baby, have this one out.
You know what? Fuck you, Dev. I was willing to stick by you even in spite of all of the stupid bullshit you've been spewing for the past year and a half, but this is the last straw. I am unsubscribing from you, and woe on anybody who gives this leftist masquerading as a centrist the time of day. There were many other cretins who came out of the woodworks to display their headassery, but I won't cover them because I would just be repeating the same point, which is this. These people cannot be reasoned with, and worse yet, a lot of them want you dead solely for disagreeing with their politics. And don't for a second let them fool you into thinking that it's because we're existential threats to democracy. If that were the case, you wouldn't have cowards like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden denouncing political violence and wishing Trump a speedy recovery. If these guys really thought that Trump was trying to destroy everything that our country stood for, and they do, why aren't they trying to justify the attempt made on his life? Why would you want someone that dangerous and morally corrupt to get better as soon as possible? It's because these people want you dead for the horrific crime of not sharing the same political opinions as them, but are cowards who can't actually stand by their principles when push comes to shove, and so they have to pretend as though they don't feel that way. For fuck's sake, they can't even honestly report what happened at the Butler rally. Read some of the headlines that the legacy media ran right after the attempted assassination. Trump escorted away after loud noises at Pennsylvania rally. Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises startles former president crowd. Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after popping noises heard at rally ahead of RNC. I understand that it's borderline impossible for a news report to be 100% accurate about an ongoing situation, but this is fucking ridiculous. Trump's rally was nationally televised, meaning millions of Americans heard guns being fired and saw blood splattered across Trump's face in real time, and yet these jackasses have the gall to try and obfuscate what's happening? Give me a fucking break. Make no mistake, we are at a very dangerous turning point. And because of that, there's justifiably been a lot of talk on the right as to how best to respond to this whole situation. I can only speak for myself, but I feel that the ideal move here is to hit the left where it hurts, at the ballot box. There's no better way to stick it to these murderous assholes than to use the democracy that they claim to adore so much to vote in the candidate that they hate, which I will definitely be doing. I also recommend that you donate to the GoFundMe that was set up for Corey Comparatone if you can. He deserves all the support we can give him. The man gave his life not only for his family, but for his country, which is more than a lot of people can say. Before I sign off, I have a feeling you guys might want to know how I feel about people like libs of TikTok getting people fired for celebrating the assassination attempt. While I would never engage in or encourage these cancel culture tactics, I'm also not sympathetic to any of these people. Not only would they not hesitate to do this exact same thing to me if given the chance, but I think if you're going to publicly call for violence against your political opponents, then you should face the consequences of your decision. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Stay strong, and please stay safe, guys, because things are going to get a lot more crazy in these coming months. Godspeed Donald Trump, rest in peace Corey Comparatone, and fuck everybody that was celebrating this. I'm Alex the Critic, and I'll see you guys next time.